What you're hearing is Hardie Fiber Cement Siding living up to its reputation as the siding that handles hail impact with ease. James Hardie knows how important a reputation is, especially when you're a contractor. That's why Hardie Siding withstands severe weather better than vinyl siding, with styles to match its strength. So you can be sure you're providing your clients with the best. Protect your reputation with exterior products by James Hardie.
Following program are pre-recorded Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spee, sitting in today for Steve Bakken on this finally Friday, Freedom Friday, Free-for-All Friday, Freaky Friday. All right, that's way too many. Let your freak flag fly Friday. All right, I had to get one more in there. Folks, thank you for joining us today. Lori Hinz is going to join us. She'll be back on Monday for the regular update when it comes to the CO2 carbon pipeline being projected and spearheaded by Summit Carbon Solutions and the state of North Dakota. She'll be back on Monday, but today I wanted to talk to Lori about the media, how the media is playing a role in the Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline, but also just the media itself, how it's changed. Whether it's the print media that's gone through a giant paradigm shift from the years 2005 to, 2012, we'll call it, over a 5 to 10 year period, the United States government created a lot of economic opportunity for tech companies. Those tech companies created social media. Those social media companies became a disruptor for the media. And my evidence is about 90 to 95% of the newspapers went bankrupt over a 10-year period. When you think about a newspaper was the originator of most of your news. The radio had its role, television had its role, but the Associated Press and many of the newspaper reporters really did create a lot of news. Talk radio, for example, whether it's Sean Hannity, whether it's Rush Limbaugh, whether it's Ed Schultz when he was around, they were a reaction to what a lot of the newspaper created. The newspaper, which relied on circulation and advertising, got some heavy competition in the form of the U.S. government. Of course, state governments, local governments as well, but it starts at the top. And when you think about what happened, whether it's too big to fail, name your bailout. Name your bailout. Because a lot of those bailouts went to tech companies. Those tech companies, as I mentioned, invested in social media. Social media then shared a lot of those newspaper stories, and they became a reaction. The radio became a reaction. Now, don't get me wrong. The radio has like the Dakota News Network, and it has some other media or news-generated outlets, but primarily most of your news was generated from the newspaper industry. The newspaper industry had a big cost known as a paper cost. They would print it. They would deliver it. Well, when their revenues started shrinking, they had to lay off people. A lot of veteran newspaper reporters got out of work. A lot of veteran newspaper executives got out of work. Do you ever wonder why the Bismarck Tribune sends emails asking you to subscribe for 99 cents for 3 months? It's because they need distribution proof. They need to go and tell advertisers that, hey, look at us. We are so good, people pay us. People want our information because it's so good, people pay us for it. Here's our media kit, which outlines our distribution. Would you like to advertise with us? Because we can get in front of all these eyeballs. We can get in front of all these different people and check out the demographics. These people right here are college educated. These people right here are married with children. These people right here are between 25 and 45. Demographics are exactly what advertisers are looking for. Social media created an opportunity for advertisers to say, you know what? I want left-handed people who eat cheeseburgers on Tuesday, and they can deliver that. So the government created economic stimulus packages, created economic grants, started choosing winners and losers, started investing in LinkedIn, invested in Mark Zuckerberg when it came to Facebook, started investing with Tom. Remember Tom from Yahoo? You got into Yahoo. He was that guy that waved at you right away. So when you take a look at how the government has changed and disrupted the media, they are suspect number one. And really, the media is the lifeblood for democracy. The media has become, and always has been, a way for public discourse to happen. Well, when ad agencies started saying, we need you to do a story on our clients, otherwise we're not going to give you this money. A lot of that money came from the government. So the government has really played a major role in misinformation. Major role. They've disrupted the free market. They started picking winners and losers, and then they started extorting media outlets to make sure that they did stories on them. You ever wonder why the media will do a story promoting an event? The newspapers never did that before. Remember, a reporter doesn't promote. A reporter reports. So the way the media used to operate, they did not do a story to talk about some barbecue coming up. They didn't do a story to talk about some government event coming up. No. What the media did is would report on that event after it happened. Well, ad agencies started disrupting and started controlling and started extorting the way the media operated. Agencies like Odney Advertising started saying, hey, we're not going to give you this money unless you do a story promoting our event. Well, then the newspaper all of a sudden got in the promotion business. They kind of hung themselves, to be honest. If they would have stood up and did a story on ad agency tries to extort the media, maybe things would have been different. I've said this before and before again. How would the world look today if Odney Advertising, who took money from the government in order to promote XYZ, instead of extorting the media by saying, we're not going to give you money unless, we're not going to sign that annual contract unless you do a story promoting our event. What if they took that money, gave it to the newspaper, and the newspaper was able to give out subscriptions, still paid for, but said, you know what? Instead of forcing us to report on what you're telling us to report on, because remember, ad agency, you know it's best. What if they bought subscriptions for people? Instead of a person getting a second job and having to trim the fat, having to cut back on quality food, having to cut back on newspaper subscriptions, having to cut back on magazine subscriptions, having to cut back on information, what if the ad agency said, you know what? We're going to give the Bismarck Tribune $10,000, and they're going to turn around and give $10,000 worth of free subscriptions to those individuals who want quality news. Think about how the world would be different today if the government was working with the media in order to give proper information instead of working with ad agencies like Odney to give you misinformation. Think about that for a second. We're going to take a commercial break and we come, that's right, because we got to pay some bills here at the radio station. We don't get all that free government money. Absolutely not. No, we have to go out there and bust our butt. We don't get free money like public-private partnerships so they can create media outlets online using social media. Lori Hins is going to be our guest to talk about how the media has changed, how our information has changed, how you have changed. My name is Jason Spees, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, and we're going to get right to our interview with Lori Hins. She's with Beck TV. She's one of our favorite people here at Super Talk 1270 and in North Dakota as well. All right, let's head over to our Zoom line and talk with Lori Hins from Beck News. She's one of the veteran journalist reporters who's been covering the carbon pipeline spearheaded by Summit Carbon Solution. And Lori, is it safe to say spearheaded by the state of North Dakota now, or have we not gotten to that point where we can say that? Because there's a lot of evidence showing that the state of North Dakota is actively involved with the pipeline, but some people believe that they were the ones that put the players together for the company. So with that, how you doing today? I didn't know how to introduce you.
Well, thank you. I'm pretty good. I can't exactly say that North Dakota has been as involved as Iowa has. I think Iowa has a lot more of the players there than we do here in North Dakota. But thank you very much for the kind introduction. And veteran is the word that stuck out to me because it is all true. I'm feeling all my age today. The interesting things that have been going on in North Dakota is we are in a holding pattern and waiting still to see what's going to happen with the both the North Dakota Industrial Commission and also the Public Service Commission. But we did get some news this week about the North Dakota Industrial Commission in terms of Lynn Helms. Now, as you know, of course, Jason, he retired, but the North Dakota Industrial Commission voted unanimously on Wednesday, the 14th, to select a candidate who will make his career in the oil and gas industry to be the top oil regulator for the state of North Dakota. His name is Nathan Anderson, and he is set to take over as Department of Mineral Resources Director September 16th. Now, shout out to Mary Sturr from the North Dakota Monitor, who put out a great article about it. She did a really nice job of covering this. She says that Anderson lives in Colorado, but has previously worked in states including North Dakota, Texas, Ohio, and Michigan. And this Nathan Anderson is going to be beginning. However, Lynn Helms retired after nearly 20 years, of course. And so it looks like he's going to be helping him along the way. So they were down to two people. And this Nathan Anderson is the guy who is it says the Minot native works for Chevron, owns a company called 3B Investments. He holds a bachelor's in geology from North Dakota State University. And in his interview with the Industrial Commission, this article that Mary Stewart says that Anderson expressed a commitment to keeping North Dakota a competitive energy state. 100% North Dakota will have a seat at the energy table, he says, quote, and a front row seat at that, at their July 30th meeting. So in July, what they did is the Industrial Commission kind of held off picking their person for another 10 days or so before they, did their final interviews and things like that. But North Dakota is going to have a new regulator at the helm at the Department of Mineral Resources.
Did that surprise you?
It did. It did surprise me. There were a couple of guys. Kevin Connors, Assistant Director for Regulatory Compliance and Energy Policy at the EERC, the University of North Dakota's Energy and Environmental Research Center, was also a finalist for the position. And in Mary Sturr's article, she says he works extensively with carbon capture. The Bismarck resident has previous experience at the Department of Mineral Resources, including 8 years in the Oil and Gas Division. And members of the Industrial Commission indicated that they hope that Kevin Connors would continue with his role at the Energy and Environmental Research Center. They said, quote, this is just a really interesting quote. They say, quote, he's a young guy that's got a lot to offer to North Dakota, and we would hope that we can maintain that relationship that we have between the DMR and EERC, Burgum said. And at his previous meeting, the commission also approved a contract to continue working with Lynn Helms, at least until the next director is brought on. So that's that bridge thing that they're going to do. By the way, for those who do not know, the Industrial Commission is made up of the Governor Doug Burgum, Attorney General Drew Wrigley, and Agriculture Commissioner Doug Goring. It is really in a very important job. It pays between $250,000 to $350,000 a year. And they're working right now, I guess, on that job offer to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on that one. But that's such a very powerful position in our state that is really interesting that they did not choose somebody from within, but rather went outside to somebody from Colorado to lead the DMR, the Department of Mineral Resources.
Now, Colorado, they did create a carbon management division. They put oil and gas and carbon under one umbrella a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago. I was out in Colorado a year ago. I interviewed Jason Maxey, I believe was his name. And if it's not, I apologize because this is a pop quiz here. I'm trying to go off memory. And he was the director going to be. And I was at a coffee shop. We sat down. We did an interview. And I was educated on kind of I guess what was going on. And for me, I wrote an article 12 years ago about ag and energy coming together, 6 years ago about the ag energy carbon triangle or trinity that is happening. And so that would be my, I guess, 2 cents in the whole thing, that he's going to bring in a carbon management infrastructure that has already been developed in Colorado. Whether he's going to bring that to North Dakota, he'll be able to pick and choose and have that sort of experience and do it the North Dakota way, that old line people like to use. So I guess that, from one standpoint, I can see bringing in an outsider because, anybody who lives 90 miles outside of your town is an expert. And so anybody from your town is, oh, we got too much dirt on him. We know where the bodies are buried, et cetera, et cetera. So,
right.
It's one of those, it depends on what positive you want to spin on it. So interesting that he's from Colorado, too, the state that has not been very friendly to oil and gas. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. All right, when we come back, let's get into the media talk. Thank you, Lori, for the update on the Industrial Commission. I had not heard that information yet. I've been so busy trying to keep my head above water, trying to raise a child, trying to fight health issues, that I totally forgot that they hired somebody new. But thank you for that. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how the media's changed. Lori Hinz, longtime media veteran. Jason Spiess, longtime media veteran. And you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
News Talk Bismarck Mandan. Super Talk 1270. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spiess. Lori Hinz is our guest. We're talking a little bit about how the media has changed. Well, we're going to get to it a little bit more, but we're layering in some current news as well. And for this segment, I want to layer in an interview I had last week, because in order to talk about how the media has changed, we should give it a little context. We should give it an example. I had Jess Mazur on last week. She's with the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. And that may have been the first time ever somebody from the Sierra Club was on Super Talk 1270, but that's okay, because we're finding that some very interesting walks of life are coming together, and really in unity, to whether it's property rights, whether it's water, whether it's economic development, whether it's eminent domain. We're really finding out that there are many, many issues with diversity of people. These are serious issues, property rights and eminent domain, because once that nut is cracked, people get a little bit worried, because are they next? What's next? Mm-hmm. How is this going to be used in the future? So let's talk a little bit about the Minnesota, because I believe there's only 1 or 2 plants. I'm actually about 3 miles from the ethanol plant in Fergus Falls. And
so that's Otter Tail County, right? Isn't that
right? Otter Tail County, which, by the way, is a very conservative county. Like, they don't even allow those CBD stuff around town. Like, you can't even get CBD in the county of Otter Tail. But it's not really part of the pipeline route. It's like a leg. It's kind of just an offshoot, if you will. So, what was your interpretation of the Minnesota? What was it? I read the economic part, but what was the actual name of it? It came out from the Commerce Department, right?
Well, I think you're talking about the environmental review.
That's it. Yes.
Okay. So there was an article on the 9th of August that came out in the Fargo Forum that talked about this too, by Ingrid Harbaugh. And in the article, I'd love to just cite this stuff, because we can surmise all we want with opinion, but I like to have my facts in front of me. And the environmental review for a section of proposed carbon capture pipeline in Otter Tail and Wilkin counties in Minnesota is now open for public comment. And that is through early September. This is ahead of a permitting decision by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. So in Minnesota, it's the PUC versus the PSC or the IUB in the other states. Everybody has their different acronyms, but this is a 394-page final environmental impact statement. It looks at about 28 miles of stretch of a pipeline running from Green Plains ethanol plant, as you were just talking about in Fergus Falls, to the North Dakota border. Then it crosses south of Breckenridge, Minnesota. And the report says the project would provide net benefits on greenhouse gas emissions, have a beneficial effect on climate change as it captures and stores carbon dioxide emissions. It also, however, acknowledges risks of a pipeline rupture, which it says could expose people and animals to levels of carbon dioxide that could cause death or injury. So there is this group in Minnesota. Now, you talked about the Sierra Club in Iowa, but in Minnesota, they have CURE, C-U-R-E, a Minnesota environmental group, and it opposes the pipeline, raised concerns about the Department of Commerce's report. And they did a big Zoom on the 6th of August. And they said the final environmental impact statement doesn't have enough detail. So the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission decides on granting the permit for the project, and they want more detail in it. She says, let's see, we're seeing Sarah Muradian, CURE Government Relations and Policy Director, told the forum, we're seeing a lack of sufficient detail to allow the commission to make an informed decision. So that's things like saying studies or surveys will be done instead of saying we actually did the study. Here's what it says about potential impacts. And boy, have we ever heard that over and over and over again. We have to make the pipeline, and then we'll see what we're going to do with regard to safety and studies and things like that is what we always hear. So during this webinar that CURE had, they said the environmental impact statement does not include enough precise information about safety, water use, greenhouse gas emissions, and potential impacts in groundwater and land. And those are the things, those are the same things we have heard in North Dakota, in South Dakota, in Iowa, the same words over and over again: water use, safety, precise information. The public comment period, by the way, still open until September 11th for Minnesota, who wants to be aware of this, Minnesotans who are getting up on it. An online hearing will then be held. It's coming up on the 21st, so that's this Wednesday too. So there's an online hearing that'll be held at 6:00 that night. So it is a case where, yes, you can have almost 400 pages of impact statement, but you're speaking in generalities, and those people who are living nearby really prefer a lot more specific information, particularly for safety protocols and the like. When you're in a rural situation, Jason, you have a little different outlook about when you need to get emergency services to you. And I think that is often overlooked by these monolithic and larger companies. They're just thinking, we'll throw a bunch of grant money at these local places and they'll be fine. Well, that's not really cutting it for the people who live in the area, because they know that these people are all volunteers. They're not always all available immediately. And so it becomes a real important issue to people who live near the pipeline in rural areas.
All right, Lori, hold the thought, because when we come back, I do want to ask you about how the media has changed, because this is the example we're talking about. You asked about if it's done by design. Well, I think it is. I mentioned some ad agencies earlier. I mentioned some public-private partnerships earlier. I mentioned how the government has intruded and how it's disrupted and how it's created a new media, if you will. And that's what we want to talk about. Because as I've mentioned, at the end of the day, the media is the eyes and the ears for the people in this busy, busy world. The media is the lifeblood for democracy. And when the media becomes disrupted, you disrupt democracy. We can't even agree on what a man or a woman is anymore. And now a statement like that, which would have been absolutely ridiculous 10 years ago, is now a political statement. You can't even say that we can't even agree on what a man or a woman is anymore without somebody publicly shaming you and having the government backing them up, not correcting them, backing them up. So when you take a look at how politics has ruined science, how the government has ruined science, how the state has ruined science, It's now become more about feelings than facts. And the state of North Dakota is to blame. Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're the first ones to try to recuse themselves of blame when they're the ones creating the problems. Lori Hintz is our guest. Jason Spees filling in for Steve Bakken. You're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in today for Steve Bakken. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. Steve will be back next week. Lori Hintz is our guest. We're talking about how the media's changed a little bit, layering in some current events as well. Before we went to break, talking about how really the government has changed the marketplace, changed communities, created winners and losers, if you will. I'm on the loser side, by the way. Yeah, I'll be the first one to admit that. When it comes to getting help from the government, I'm on the loser side. I mean, we didn't even get any COVID help. Commerce, they shut the door right in my face. Oh, yeah, they need to take care of their own people, not a single parent fighting cancer. No, go get a fourth or fifth job, will you? One of the things that Jess Mazur brought up from the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, which really speaks to people in Minnesota, is the water issue. I didn't realize the amount of water that this pipeline was projected to use. What are you hearing on the water issue in North Dakota or with the people that you're talking with?
Just last week when Steve Bakken and I were talking about it, I brought that up and he reiterated precisely what you said, that this is a very big and important issue that's really not getting the attention yet, anyway, that it needs to be done. And my question for him was, what is the bigger picture here? What is the end game of this after all? There is a 2,500-mile CO2 pipeline that is slated to go through 5 states, end with sequestration northwest of the Bismarck Mandan area in Oliver and Mercer and Morton counties now. And to me, there's got to be something bigger going on here. And I'm trying to kind of figure out what exactly that is. But I do know that you are right, that the water issue has been minimized previously. And I don't know if that's by design or whether it's just been oversight. But it seems like more we are learning about how once you put those CO2 tons into the ground, it is going to affect things like aquifers and water sources and people's water. So I think it's definitely gaining traction. Particularly, people are talking about it more in North Dakota, I will say, Jason.
There's a good chance it could be done by design. And my evidence to that would be the DAPL pipeline, because the water became a bigger issue than the oil. Actually, at the end of the day, water is life. The protesters were really focused on the water. A lot of these public-private partnerships have kind of become their own little media outlets because so much is reliant on social media now. You're a television station. We're a radio station. I also did print for 30 years. So I've been a part of the paradigm shift now twice, once with the print industry, the blog revolution, if you will. But the blog revolution was heavily funded by the government, whether it's Google, whether it was Yahoo, whether it was Facebook, whether it was Twitter. A number of these social medias got financed essentially by tax dollars. That put out the newspaper industry. I think about 95% of the newspapers went bankrupt over a 5-year period. Now that's happening with radio and television, where a lot of these media outlets are barely hanging on, because when you take a look at whether it's, the city of Williston coming out with their media team, or it's the city of Fargo coming out with their media team, they don't look at it that way, but marketing dollars are marketing dollars. So if your marketing team decides they're not going to invest in your local media, Tioga newspaper went out of business. How does an oil boom, the heart of the oil boom in North Dakota, how does the newspaper go out of business? Well, by design, because if you're not helping the media, people are still getting their news from somewhere. So a lot of these public-private partnerships have their own little media outlets, and so many people are online now getting their initial news from social media. Lori, you know that you use social media. I use social media. Newspapers use social media basically as an advertisement to get people to go to your media outlet, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I like to think, and I'm, as you know, a radio veteran of 42 years. Before I moved over to television full time, I did some part-time things on television during the years, but I was a radio announcer for 42 straight years. And so I am a big believer in radio. I just am. It's hard for me to envision it ending in any way, shape, or form. But I have seen things in the last year and a half that I never had seen before in radio. Things like people purchasing whole radio programming and shows to get their agenda about their private entity out there. I've never seen that before in radio. That was a new one for me. I had thought, okay, maybe someday somebody's just going to buy up this whole, radio station and stuff. But it never occurred to me that they would purchase people to put on the air to do that sort of thing. So that's a new one. The other thing that's happening with radio that I am seeing right now is the use of AI, which means many, many, many people in radio who had worked as voices and as talent and radio announcers are being shuffled out the door left and right. I have a very good friend who was a longtime legend in South Dakota that just got shown the door recently, and it was really disturbing to see that. I know that some people in Bismarck Mandan have lost their jobs recently because the major monolithic, again, same sort of deal where you've got a very large company, a media company, if you will, run by, in my case, I worked for Clear Channel for a while that became iHeartMedia, and they became terrible bean counters and just sucked all the joy out of radio for me. I was very thankful to be able to, in the last days of my radio career, work for a local person rather than a big company. But they are shuffling people out the door because they are able to use voices from AI now and do exactly what they don't even need people, to give the weather. That's been automated for, at least 15, 20 years, where when you hear somebody give the weather forecast, you've got a sensor outside and it's a recorded voice and it's all fake now. So, this is happening now with media where you have people who are, and this is really disturbing for people to hear. They're like, are you kidding me? You mean that's not a person anymore on there? Well, you might have one or two in a building of 6 radio stations with a big cluster like that, but heaven help us if we have any type of a disaster like they did in Minot of the train derailment where somebody passed away, because you will not have the radio there to help you and support you. And people automatically think that those stations are, public entities. Well, they're for public consumption, but they're certainly private industry, and people do not realize that all the time. So that is definitely not a public-private. And then you also have public radio, which actually supplants and gets tons more money than the local guy scratching out a living at a radio station. It's just a real evolving thing. I'm kind of happy, kind of thankful that I made the leap from radio before I was replaced by an AI voice doing what I do. So
now we're getting into it. All right. Lori Hins, hold that thought till after the top of the hour news. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bakken. You're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town. Weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Without apology, The Regular Joe Show with Joe Gigante. Weekday evenings at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app. Portions of the following program are pre-recorded. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bakken. Lori Hins is our guest today. We're talking about how the media's changed over the past couple decades, how the government has influenced and disrupted the media, and how ad agencies have changed the content in the media by saying, we're not going to advertise with you unless you do stories on our events, on our companies. So reporting has become promoting. It's a different deal. And a lot of the general public, they want reporting, they want facts, they want information. So when the government steps in, gives money to public-private partnerships, gives money to ad agencies, picks their winners and losers, and then those winners, if you will, turn into losers by making people do things otherwise they're not going to give the money, it becomes extortion. It becomes really influencing the message. And if you go to the source, that's where the money comes from, the root, follow the money, if you will. It's coming from the government so often. And that's one of the reasons they have the confidence and the power to do what they're doing, because a private company, they wouldn't keep giving the money to these different entities, these marketing directors, these ad agencies, if you will, that are now forcing media outlets to become their promoters rather than reporters. Just to give people some context, so what Lori originally talked about was basically paid programming, which is that instead of buying a station now, you just buy somebody and buy the airtime and present the show like it's a real show. And realistically, according to FCC, because remember, the FCC is the one that built the infrastructure. That's why the Minot, Clear Channel, iHeart got in trouble, because the infrastructure was built by the FCC. And when I was at KFGO, we were an emergency broadcast station. We had to have somebody in that place at all times in case there was a train derailment. And that's the example there, that Clear Channel was supposed to have somebody in the building in case there was any sort of accident, because people relied on emergency broadcasting, and they got paid for it. They got money for it. They got federal dollars to be an emergency station.
Correct.
And the radio show you're talking about currently that's being purchased in the Bismarck Mandan area, I said for a long time, they actually should be running this is a paid program before it airs, just like Ron Popeil and Billy Blanks and all those infomercials you see on TV. There's no difference. It's an infomercial. It is a paid program. It is not for public consumption. It's a special agenda. The second part that you're talking about with the AI, just to give people some context, to show you how ruthless this industry is getting now. When you went to McDonald's, there was a person that took your order, and then pretty soon they outsourced that to India. Well, now they're taking that job away from the person in India and just giving it to a computer now. So, I mean, that's where we're going with that, where AI is now taking out jobs from the global economy.
We've talked about this for how many years and decades, and someday we're going to be replaced by computers. And now we're seeing it in real time. It truly is happening. There is some humanity that disappears with that, and there is some safety. I truly believe. I'm kind of a preacher for people to realize that, hey, when those people go by, so does their ability to make good, solid decisions for your safety in a short amount of time. And that I think I find it dangerous. I rely on AM radio. I rely on radio, period, to get me good information. I will tell you the other thing that's happening now that is so fascinating is you were talking earlier about news delivery, and news delivery has completely changed for Lori Hins. I have gone from watching television news and network news to chucking that about 20 years ago. I stopped watching it because it made my blood pressure rise all the time, and it wasn't worth it to give myself an aneurysm. And then I stopped, reading the newspaper to this day, when the newspaper will sometimes they'll toss it onto my driveway, and I'll take it and just throw it right in the dumpster, because I don't need the propaganda mostly. And then now I have switched to, if you can believe it, I love to get my best up-to-date news from X, Twitter. Twitter has been renamed X by Elon Musk, and Elon Musk has done more for the freedom of speech than anybody in this country has for as long as I can remember. I am just shocked at how much more rapidly and more accurately I can get my news from feeds on Twitter and X it is right now. If you would have told me that 10 years, I never would have believed that I would be even interested in being on Twitter X, but it's phenomenal. And as is evidenced by I don't know how many, I think last I saw it was 59 billion people who had seen or heard the Twitter Spaces that Trump did with Elon Musk as a conversation just last week. It broke everything to get it on. They had about 42 minutes before they could even get on because they were being so vehemently attacked by DDoS issues. So it was phenomenally different. And I'm shocked at how news is delivered and is received. If you look at the younger, I just saw a statistic today that of those people who actually listened to that it wasn't an interview, it was a conversation between, which is what made it so fascinating and so much more newsworthy and interesting. But 77% or 34 years old and under who listened to that.
All right, now we're getting into the meat of it, Lori. Now we're getting into the meat of it. So we got to take a quick pause and pay some bills here on Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees. I'm sitting in for Steve Bakken today. Lori Hinz is our guest. She's with Beck TV, longtime media journalist, longtime media personality. We're having a little bit of I don't know, maybe a therapy session for a couple media people trying to figure out what the heck happened over the last 15 to 20 years. So I want to talk a little bit about my background in print when we come back and explain how the print media has really changed. I mentioned it before. Most of your news came from the print industry, whether it was Associated Press, whether it was the beat reporters, the court reporters, etc. Don't get me wrong, the Dakota News Networks and fine radio news journalists, they contribute too. But the overall original news generally came from the newspaper industry. My name is Jason Spees. Lori Hinz is our guest. I'm sitting in today for Steve Bakken, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town, brought to you by Big Boy, just get in line. It moves fast. Trademark Realty and Silver Ranch. Talk of the Town.
Are you ever questioning when life will slow down? Are you
Super Talk. Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in today for Steve Bakken. Lori Hinz is our guest. She's with Beck TV. We're going to get right back into our conversation about how the media has changed, how your information has changed, how misinformation has taken over the media today in a variety of different ways. When you take a look at the progression of the media, by the way, Katz study came out this week, and radio was the most trusted news source now. Actually, television was second. Newspapers were third. Social media was last. And social media was like under 25%. But here's what I will say about social media and the internet is when you take a look at the internet, because keep in mind, I was in print before. Print was my 25-year career. Radio was always something I did on the side. And print was always the source. It was always the source because you had editors, you had copy editors, you had headline writers. There was such a vetting process that you had to basically not get sued, right? You know, and then talk radio came out, and then Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Alan Combs and Ed Schultz, they kind of became a bigger than life type of deal to where it was more opinion talk. And then a lot of the news stations, the CNNs, the Fox News, took over that model to where, they became more of an opinion and talk rather than news. For me, I don't have a problem with those. I got rid of my television in 2006, so I haven't had any of those shows on at all. But I've always said if they just rebranded themselves as an opinion and talk news station, nobody'd have a problem with it. But when you call them news, well, people don't like that. But when you take a look at the evolution of kind of what's happening, like I mentioned, when the blogosphere came out, the newspaper industry got hit. And now that social media is really taken off to where you can go to Walgreens, spend $50 on a podcast kit, go home, and all of a sudden you're now a journalist. Okay. Well, what the internet essentially is it's about 10% content creators, news people, and then the rest of the 90% is a reaction to those original news producers. You are an original news producer. I am still in somewhat an original news producer. A lot of news reporters for newspapers and television, the nightly news type things, they're producing original news, and on a local level or national level. And then much of the internet just becomes a reaction to that. And a lot of people love the reaction. They want to. Jon Stewart used to say, Jon Stewart from The Daily Show, he goes, we're not a news show. We don't produce any news. He goes, you got to understand. He goes, people are not getting their news from us. They already have the news when they watch us. They're getting opinions and context from us, but we're not giving them the news. They already have the news. And there's a lot of truth behind that, Lori. There really is.
Yep, that's true. We have such a unique business here at Beck Television. And for those who are not familiar with Beck, it's not B-E-C-K, it is B-E-K. And B-E-K stands for Burleigh, Emmons, and Kidder counties in North Dakota. We have a 72-year-old cooperative. This is a most phenomenal idea, and it's so innovative to use a board of directors and a CEO who answers to the board of directors cooperative and turn it into an independent alternative news source. It's just such an amazing brainchild of the people that I am proud to say that I get to work for at Beck Television. We started doing sports 18, 20 years ago now. And then about four and a half years ago now, we started doing this broadcast that was completely different. And now we've reinvented ourselves. So we've got an app and we do streaming for anybody worldwide. In fact, we have a great deal of people who listen to the news that we put out here at Beck Television via our app, which is BeckTV.plus, BeckTV.plus. And it's a complete reinvention of delivering news to people. It is just so innovative. I will tell you that we don't have to worry about networks censoring us at Beck Television because we are our own network. We do our own stuff. We don't have any overlords over us. So it's a really brilliant idea when you think about it. And I'm curious to see if our model is going to be picked up by other places across the country where they will have citizen journalists who actually do the hard work and do the homework and do the actual investigation and go to the meetings and report on it and don't just spew opinions like some big clown blogger somewhere. It's a totally different world.
So when we're talking about whether it's Twitter or whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's I'm not sure if anybody's really using Facebook for news anymore. It's more Facebook is more soft news like People Magazine. So when you take a look at Facebook, that is primarily pictures and kind of that People Magazine soft news.
I would recommend not using Facebook for your news. And I know there's a lot of people who do that, particularly in my age demo, which is I'm 60. So for those of us who are in the 50 to 75 range, I think a lot of my colleagues in that area, my cohorts are getting a lot of what they consider information on Facebook. But Facebook is so roundly and purposefully and just unashamedly skewed and censored that I couldn't do it anymore. I've really moved much further away from Facebook just simply because I like to share information there that I get on Twitter. because I get uncensored stuff from Twitter.
And when you take a look at Twitter or X, as I mentioned, a lot of the old school journalists, again, the news producers, the original content producers, that's where they gravitated to because they're used to headlines. They're used to writing headlines. They're used to putting out headlines. As I mentioned, Facebook and Instagram essentially became the People Magazine or the soft let's sit on the beach and look through a magazine without thinking very much. Let the pictures do tell the story for us. But LinkedIn, oh my word, LinkedIn. When you go and look at a LinkedIn post and then go click on who likes it, oh, it's all salesmen and government workers. It is like lobbyist central on LinkedIn. It is the most propaganda. LinkedIn has so much propaganda. It is absolutely disgusting now, to where it's amazing to see these social medias kind of carve out their own little niche now. And it's, and as I mentioned, conflict of interest. And we're going to get back to the pipeline here in a second, because we are talking about the pipeline still, but we're talking about it from a 5,000-foot view, because remember, the media is the lifeblood for democracy. Lori Hins is our guest. My name is Jason Spees, and you're listening to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk 1270. Welcome back to Talk of the Town on Super Talk 1270.
Welcome back to Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town. My name is Jason Spees, sitting in for Steve Bach. And one more segment here with Lori Hins, talking about how the media has changed, how the government has changed the media, how public-private partnerships have changed the media, how social media has changed the media. It's a real thing, folks. Every time you hear somebody talk about fake news or misinformation, generally it's because of the government, whether they're giving you misinformation, whether they're influencing the marketplace with their dollars, whether they're extorting media outlets by saying, if you don't do a story on our event or our advertiser, we're not going to give you any money, as opposed to just letting the company speak for itself, as opposed to letting the event advertise so people can go. Whatever happened to merit? It's like gone in North Dakota. What's going on here, folks? When you think about it, how much money, Senator Ray Holmberg, he just got busted for pedophilia, basically. And that's okay? That's okay with you folks? A grown man using state money to travel all over the world to be a predator in power on young children? And the elected officials are going to look over their shoulder like it's no big deal because he was corrupt? North Dakota's got a real problem. And it starts with the government, because they are controlling about name me one industry in the state that the government does not have their hands in, that the state does not have their hands in. Seriously, try it. You're not going to find one industry that the state has not influenced. And we all know there's a dirty dozen, a real soulless group of people controlling the state. These are sick people. These are sick people. But you know what's worse than the sick people? Are the entitled enablers. That's where your money's going. It's not going to the fire department. It's going to the enablers that enable people like Senator Ray Holmgren out in Grand Forks to travel all over the country, all over the world, to be a pedophile. That's sick. And I get it. I'm a crazy bad man because I stand up to pedophiles, because I stand up against corruption. And then the tax dollars gets used against me for having the audacity to say, stop the abuse, stop the gaslighting. I apologize, Lori. I'm ordained. I was a Sunday school teacher. I went to Catholic school, so spoon-fed fear and guilt, my whole life. So that's some of that stuff stuck. I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner like everybody else, but every day I wake up and I try not to be a sinner, and every day I fail. Should point out and circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the rural fire departments, where last I checked, and this was last year, 67% of firefighters are volunteer in the United States, and in rural areas, it's up to 80%, depending on which state you're in. And that's a problem to me. And here's my issue. My issue is this. My education, my North Dakota education, whether it was through the Catholic school diocese at Holy Spirit, whether it was through the public school education system at Fargo North, whether it was my paid education at North Dakota State University in the political science classes or the government classes or civil service classes, whatever I took throughout my entire career of being educated, they always taught me that the government was supposed to take care of roads and bridges and emergency services. And I've always had a problem with this, because I really don't believe that some, business that has nothing to do with helping the public should be funded before we get firefighters funded. Like, we should really talk about getting firefighters as a main staple in counties and cities. I understand smaller towns like Fort Tuna and Pelican Rapids, some communities that have a few hundred people. Yeah, it's not feasible, so they can have a volunteer firefighting department. But Dickinson, North Dakota is volunteer still. And that's like, what, 20-some thousand people? I mean, might even be bigger than that. So when we're talking about firefighters and we're talking about rushing a carbon pipeline through people's yards and communities and being X amount of feet from a school and everything else, and nobody brings up that, you know what, we probably should fund the fire department here. I mean, these are people saving lives. This is not even the thin blue line here. This is just basic fire protection. So I don't know if you have any comments on that. I mean,
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shocker. I know that's so surprising. But when I first started investigating the whole story over, 14 months ago now, when I started taking a look at it, I spoke to an emergency manager, very, very well-respected emergency manager about this. And off the record, off camera, I asked about hazmat. And they're talking about that in this PHMSA article this release from PHMSA. They're talking about hazmat. And I asked how many hazmats we have in North Dakota. And this emergency manager told me we have four hazmat kits in the state. It was Fargo, Forks, Minot, and Bismarck have hazmat kits. And I was stunned at the time to hear that. And it didn't even occur to me. So I basically said, so if you're in Emmons County and down in Linton, North Dakota, and you have a break in the pipeline there, you're out of luck. You're basically out of luck because you don't even have any type of hazmat apparatus to be able to go and rescue people if you wanted to. So this is why this is such an important aspect of this. And the people who are pushing the whole project are very flippant with the safety part of it. They're like, no, we'll be fine. We're doing lots of training and we're sending people down to Texas. And it is very alarming for the people who hear the folks at the company talk about that, because they just seem to minimize the import of it. And that is, it's fine. We've got already 5,200 miles of hazardous pipeline CO2 already in the United States. They're running just fine. Well, they're not running past large population centers. And this is what is different about this pipeline versus the other ones. The other thing that's different about it is it's coalescing. And it just occurred to me this week to start thinking about the fact that you've got highly corrosive, if it comes in contact with water, CO2 from 57 separate entities that you've got to make sure are completely dehydrated before you get them through there. Otherwise, you're going to have corrosion problems with your pipeline, as I understand it. So it occurred to me, you have to have the most sensitive and incredible monitoring information for each one of those individual pipelines, because each one is going to not have the exact same amount of corrosion in it. And you are going to have to keep track of all of the monitoring for 57 entities and 2,500 miles of pipeline. It is just such a massive scale. This is so different that I think it's worth looking at. When I started thinking about how you have to have monitors on each one of those 57 individual feeder pipelines, that is a lot of room for error.
Unfortunately, Lori, we are out of time. It's been a fun conversation today. We'll see you back on Monday, folks. Lori Hins is back Monday. I'm back Monday, and I know you will be too. My name is Jason Spees, and this is Super Talk 1270's Talk of the Town.
Talk of the Town, weekday mornings starting at 9 on Super Talk 1270 and the free Super Talk 1270 mobile app.